Hi, my name is Aver. I walked into my sister's wedding telling myself to breathe, to smile, to take a seat and become part of the wallpaper. Crystal lights dripped from the ceiling. Violins stitched the room together. And every table shone like a promise I was never offered. I kept my hands wrapped around a glass of water so they would not shake. She found me in seconds. Her veil trailed behind her like a white comet. "Oh, you made it," she said, loud enough for the nearest tables. "I was worried you would be busy with your very important life." The bridesmaids laughed. I skimmed over my dress, my quiet shoes, the empty ring finger I did not hide quickly enough. She leaned closer, all sugar and perfume, and asked if I had come alone. Then she answered for me. "Of course. Who would you bring?" It was not a question. It was a verdict. A cousin raised his phone to capture a souvenir. An aunt patted my arm and advised I sit in the last row so I could slip out if I felt overwhelmed. My sister tilted her head like a judge considering a sentence and said, to try not to draw attention during the ceremony, "You know how you get." The laughter that followed was soft and clean, like glass breaking in another room. I took the last pew. Stained glass painted the aisle in honey and wine. I counted breaths. 1 to steady my chest. 2 to swallow the heat in my throat. 3 to stop the old habit of apologizing for existing. The violins faded as the priest stepped to the lectern. People turned as one body, expectant, ready to witness her perfect day. Then the priest looked up and searched the room as if he had misplaced something valuable. His gaze found the back row and held. He closed the book. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to acknowledge an honored guest." My sister's smile flickered. A ripple moved through the seats. He spoke my full name with careful dignity, the way a craftsman sets a stone. "Congratulations on your appointment. It is a privilege to have you here, Your Honor." Sound changed. The chapel breathed and forgot to exhale. Phones lowered. The cousin stared at his shoes. The aunt beside me rose half an inch, as if respect had weight. I felt the old wall inside me crack, the one built from years of being called nobody. Light slipped through the fracture and warmed my ribs. My sister's bouquet trembled. I watched her mouth form a word that never reached the ear. No, but truth had already been spoken. And truth does not ask permission to stand. Have you ever been told you were small so many times that you started to believe it, until one sentence made the room see you as you are? Would you forgive, or would you fight? The hotel where the wedding took place looked like something carved out of glass and gold. Chandeliers spilled light across the polished marble floors, each crystal catching fire as the violinists tuned their instruments. The scent of lilies drifted heavy in the air, mixing with the sweetness of champagne. Every corner gleamed like a stage set for perfection. I found myself sitting near the back, at a table half-shadowed by towering centerpieces of roses and orchids. My dress was simple, one I had worn to more than one family event, chosen not for glamour, but because it was safe, quiet, and forgettable. In a room where satin gowns swept across the floor and diamonds winked from manicured hands, my presence barely registered. The guests moved like dancers in a world that was not mine. Silver cutlery clanked in rhythmic precision. Champagne flutes chimed like bells. Laughter swelled and dipped in practiced harmony. I pressed my palms flat against my knees, grounding myself in the solid wood of the chair. The surface felt too smooth, too polished, as if even the furniture was whispering that I did not belong here. When the photographer moved through the crowd, his camera lingered on my sister, radiant in white lace. She stood tall, veil cascading behind her, bouquet poised just so. With each click of the shutter, she gathered her bridesmaids close, their dresses shimmering in pastel hues. I felt the sting each time the lens turned away before reaching me. As though invisibility was the only role I had been given, the string quartet began to play there. Music rose above the chatter, filling the chapel with solemn anticipation. Guests hushed and turned toward the altar, where the groom waited with nerves disguised beneath his smile. And in that moment, surrounded by opulence and expectation, I felt more like an intruder than a sister. Every detail seemed to underline my smallness. The shimmer of sequins I did not own, the glitter of jewelry I could never afford, the warmth of conversations I was not part of. The air itself carried the message, as if the very walls of the chapel had been taught to whisper, "You are nobody here." The ceremony had not yet started when my sister seized her chance. She glided across the aisle, veil brushing against the polished floor, and stopped just close enough that her words could be heard by everyone around us. Her smile was bright enough to blind, but her voice cut sharp. "Oh, you made it," she said, her tone drenched in sweetness that didn't reach her eyes. "I was worried you might be too busy with nothing." The last word landed like a blade, and the bridesmaids laughed on cue, a chorus rehearsed to perfection. I stiffened in my seat, my hands curled in fists against the fabric of my dress. But I forced myself to keep still. Round us, a few guests chuckled politely, as though it were harmless teasing. But the sting seared deeper than any joke. She let her gaze sweep over me, pausing deliberately on my shoes, then on my bare wrist. "You came alone, didn't you?" she asked. Without waiting for my answer, she tilted her head and supplied it herself. "Of course. Who would you bring?" Laughter rippled louder this time. A cousin raised his phone, filming as though my humiliation was part of the entertainment. I caught the smirk on his face before he quickly pretended to adjust the lens. An aunt leaned closer and whispered in my ear, "Just sit quietly at the back, dear. No one will notice you there." The words hit harder than the laughter. My throat tightened, the heat climbing from my chest to my eyes. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, to claw back even an inch of dignity. But my voice locked inside me. Silence became my only shield, and even that felt fragile. My sister smiled wider, victorious. She turned back toward her bridesmaids, lifting her bouquet as though nothing cruel had just been spoken. The room moved on. Conversations resumed. But the bruise of that moment clung to me. There, in the middle of her wedding, in front of family and strangers alike, I wasn't a sister. I wasn't even a guest. I was entertainment, the nobody she wanted everyone to see. That sting in the wedding hall was sharp, but it was not new. It was the echo of years that had already carved me down to nothing. Her words, her laughter, her superiority, they were threads woven tightly through my past, a pattern I knew too well. I remembered the day of my high school graduation. I had won an award for excellence in writing, the kind of recognition that only came once in a lifetime. But when relatives crowded our living room the evening, it was her photograph in a beauty pageant sash that was passed around with admiration. "Look at her smile," they said. "She'll go far." My certificate, tucked carefully in my hands, drew no eyes. I smiled anyway, because drawing attention to myself had never been safe. There was the family reunion where I saved money for months to buy thoughtful gifts. Books I thought would matter, novels I loved. My sister unwrapped hers, wrinkled her nose, and left it forgotten on the table while others gathered to see what jewelry she had received from friends. Later, when the group photo was taken, she shifted subtly until I was out of the frame. When the album was printed, I was missing. It was as if I had never been there at all. And then there were the nights when she needed me. She flirted with the idea of law school once, and I was the one who stayed awake with her, quizzing her on cases, helping her understand legal principles. But when she spoke at family dinners, she claimed her progress as her own, brushing past my help like it had been nothing. My parents applauded, and I stayed silent, because correcting her would have sounded like envy. The words she used on me were never random. They were deliberate, planted like seeds that grew into walls. "You're lucky I let you borrow my things. Don't try too hard. People notice when you fail. Not everyone can be someone important, and that's fine. Some people are just background." I carried those sentences in my chest like stones. Each insult left a bruise I learned to hide. Each dismissal taught me to shrink smaller. I told myself if I kept studying harder, working longer, going lower, one day I might escape the gravity of her voice. One day someone would notice. One day, the silence would break. But on that night, in that wedding hall, it felt like nothing had changed. All the old ghosts of humiliation pressed close, whispering that I would never be more than what she declared me to be, a nobody. What I did not yet know was that fate was about to shift, and the silence that had defined me would be shattered in front of them all. The string quartet slowed to a hush, the air inside the chapel rippling with expectation. Guests straightened in their seats as the priest stepped forward, his book pressed firmly against the lectern. He scanned the room, eyes moving across polished hair, pressed tuxedos, sequin gowns. Then, his gaze stopped on me. It wasn't the fleeting glance of someone acknowledging a guest. It was recognition. For the first time that night, I did not feel invisible. He cleared his throat, and the silence deepened. "Before we begin," he said, with steady, "I would like to acknowledge someone in our midst." My sister's smile froze. Her knuckles whitened against her bouquet. She tried to laugh, a brittle sound. "Father, this is hardly necessary. Let us keep the focus where it belongs." But the priest did not look at her. He looked only at me. "It is rare," he continued, "that I have the privilege of addressing a newly appointed judge in my congregation. Tonight, it is my honor to welcome." He spoke my full name slowly, clearly, so no one could mistake it. "Your Honor." A wave of murmurs swept the chapel. Some guests gasped aloud. Others turned, whispering to one another in disbelief. The cousin who had been filming me earlier fumbled with his phone, suddenly lowering it, unsure if this was still a joke worth capturing. For a heartbeat, I thought my legs would fail me. But the words, "Your Honor," anchored me, filled my chest with a heat that was not shame, but light. Every night of study, every sacrifice, every humiliation I had endured crystallized into that single moment. My sister's face blanched. She shook her head as if the priest had spoken blasphemy. "No," she mouthed silently. But truth had already been spoken, and truth needs no permission to stand. The guests shifted in their seats, respect reshaping their posture. I felt the weight of years begin to lift. For the first time, it was not my sister's voice defining who I was. It was mine, carried in the title she could never take away. And as I sat straighter, I realized the ceremony was no longer hers alone. It was the stage where my silence would finally end. The chapel seemed to hold its breath. The chandeliers still blazed above us, but their glow felt sharper now, cutting across every polished surface. All eyes had turned from the bride in her gown to me in the back row. The nobody suddenly pulled into the center of the story. Gasps turned into whispers. Whispers into rising waves of disbelief. "Judge? Did he say judge, she?" Impossible. The same mouths that once laughed at me now struggled to shape the words that fit this truth. My sister's composure cracked. She forced a laugh, shrill and unsteady. "Oh, Father, surely you've made a mistake," she said, her voice breaking at the edges. She's nothing. Everyone here knows it." The priest closed his book with a soft finality, like a gavel striking wood. "I do not make mistakes with truth," he said firmly. Her appointment was confirmed. She has earned this honor through years of dedication, and we are privileged to have her here tonight. The room shifted. I could feel the weight of ice no longer dismissive, but searching. Re-evaluating, the cousin who had been filming me earlier turned off his camera. Cheeks flushed with shame. My aunt, who had told me to sit quietly at the back, pressed trembling hands together as if in prayer. Even the groom looked uneasily between his bride and me, his smile faltering. I rose. My knees trembled, but I stood tall, each step toward the all ringing against the marble floor. Silence followed me, thick and heavy, broken only by the rustle of my sister's bouquet as she clutched it too tightly, crushing the petals. She turned toward me, eyes wild, This is my day," she hissed, voice cracking. Loud enough for the nearest rows to hear. "Not yours. Sit down. You don't belong here." But the silence that answered her was not mine alone. It was the silence of the crowd. The silence of judgment. The silence that told her the balance had shifted. I lifted my chin, meeting her gaze without flinching. For the first time in my life, I did not shrink. I did not hide. I let the truth stand, and it stood taller than her veil, her crown, or her pride. In that moment, the humiliation she had prepared for me reversed itself. The entire chapel saw not her triumph, but her desperation. And one, the sister she had called nobody, had become the name they would never forget. The marble floor echoed beneath my steps as I moved closer to the altar. Each breath in the chapel seemed synchronized with mine, as though the entire room was waiting for what I might say. My sister's eyes darted around wildly, searching for someone, anyone, to laugh with her, to restore her throne of superiority. But no one came. Her voice cracked, desperation leaking through. "She's not important. She's nothing. You've all believed her lies." She turned to the crowd, pleading. But her words scattered uselessly like petals in the wind. The priest's calm presence angered the room. He looked directly at her, his voice low yet unshakable. "Truth is not a lie, my child. It is your cruelty that has been exposed here." A hush spread deeper. The guests who once joined in her laughter now averted their eyes. Some shifted in their seats, shame rippling across their faces. The cousin who had mocked me earlier pressed his phone against his chest, unwilling to meet my gaze. My aunt bent her head, as though bowing not only to me, but to the truth she had ignored for years. I stopped at the first row, not quite at the altar, but no longer at the back. I lifted my chin, my voice calm and steady. "You called me a nobody, sister. You erased me, belittled me, treated me like a shadow in my own family. But tonight, the truth stands taller than your cruelty. I don't need to prove myself anymore. You did that for me when you tried to bury me with shame. And now, all of them see you for who you are." Her bouquet slipped from her grip. Roses scattered across the marble, bruised and broken. She fell silent, her face pale, the weight of humiliation crashing onto her shoulders. The veil that once made her radiant now looked like a mask of defeat. The crowd did not clap. They did not cheer. Instead, they gave me something heavier, more powerful. Their silence, respect filled that silence. Acknowledgement pulsed through it. My sister, who had once weaponized that same silence to make me feel small, now drowned in it. I stood tall, not gloating, not shouting, just standing. The truth had spoken, and nothing else was needed. The wedding resumed, but the energy in the chapel was broken beyond repair. The chandeliers still sparkled, the violinists still played, yet it all sounded hollow. Like a performance no one truly believed in anymore. Guests shifted in their seats, their gazes drawn to me even when they tried to focus on the bride. Respect, quiet and heavy, had taken the place of ridicule. My sister moved stiffly through her vows, her voice thin, her smile brittle. She no longer looked like the queen she had imagined herself to be. Every petal in her bouquet seemed wilted, every laugh forced, every promise ringing false. She had wanted to shine brighter than everyone, but now her light was dimmed by the shadow of her own cruelty. When the ceremony ended, relatives approached me hesitantly. My aunt squeezed my hand, her eyes wet. "I should have defended you sooner," she whispered. A cousin who had once mocked me muttered an awkward apology before slipping away. Even the groom's parents inclined their heads respectfully, recognizing the title that could no longer be denied. My sister avoided me. She swept past, veil trailing like a torn curtain, her smile gone. Her humiliation followed her like a second train she could not shed. I didn't chase her. I didn't need to. Outside, the night was clear, the air cool against my skin. The stars above felt brighter than the chandeliers inside, each one a reminder that truth shines without permission. For years, I had been made invisible, silenced, treated as if I were less than nothing. But now, the silence belonged to me, not as a weapon of shame, but as proof of dignity. I walked away not as the forgotten sister, not as a guest on the edge of the frame. I walked away as myself, judge, survivor, the one who endured,